Well, hey, on today's show, we have the former Director of Creative Services over at Publix here to talk to us about branding and his career there. Come on, welcome to the show, Tim Cox. Awesome. Well, Tim, thanks for being on the show, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, dude, I've honestly, even from the beginning, starting the show a little over 6 months ago, thinking through a list of people who I'm like, this would be awesome to have on the show at some point. You were on that list, so I'm glad
we're like number 25 on the list. Right?
No, you were definitely far up. But honestly, when we first started, I was like, okay, 5 people. I got to think of 5 people that I could. But it's definitely gotten fair. So I'm happy. I'm happy to have you on the show now. How's your year? We're starting off here in February now with this episode. How's your year going so far?
Year's going great, man. We're in our Lakeland sort of groove. You know, we spend 6 months in Georgia, 6 months in Lakeland, and it's always great to come back to Lakeland. So back in the Lakeland groove, you know, doing a few days a week at Catapult and trying to make sure there's always some time for some golf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You golfing a lot? I guess you can kind of golf a lot at both places, right?
Yeah.
North Georgia, down here.
Yeah. I mean, I try to golf a couple times a week.
How long have you, I'm actually curious, how long have you been playing golf like for?
Well, I mean, I started hacking at golf when I was a kid, but no clue, you know. It's like I would just go with my dad, and then when I got, you know, a little older, teenager, I kept playing, but other sports were really more my focus. So never played golf competitively, and that's sort of like been the case for years and years. It was just a social thing, but I would say in the last 5 years, I've gotten a lot more serious, more focused, just enjoying it a whole lot more.
Well, it feels like in the last, I know we were talking about this before the show started, but even in the last 5 years, it feels like golf has just picked up this steam. Like it's like so much more popular than like, I remember when I was a kid, I did this thing called, I think it's called First Tee.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah. It was
there's a First Tee in Lakeland. It's run by the Y.
Yeah. It was, I don't think ours was run by the Y, but either way, it was like you went through these booklets. You went from like, it was almost like karate where you go from like green belt to yellow to red, to all this stuff. And I did that mostly because my dad just really wanted me to know how to do it. And then as soon as I was out, I was like, oh, golf isn't cool, you know? Yeah. And just now, the last 5 years, dude, like golf brands, golf style, like just everything is
totally.
fire.
I think, you know, like most things, it's cyclical. Back in the Tiger era, especially in his younger days, golf got really popular with the youth.
Yeah.
And then, you know, over time, it kind of waned a little bit, lost some of its popularity. And then I think the most significant thing that really gave it a jolt was COVID. Because when COVID came along, you know, people were like, okay, what can we do outside? And golf was one of the few things that kind of, I mean, some of the courses shut down for a little while, but it was one of the first things to open back up. So people are like stuck at home looking for something to do outside, and golf and fishing and camping, all those things blew up. So people that I know that are kind of in the golf industry, they had their best years, you know, right after COVID.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. I feel like down here in Florida too, like golf courses were open a month or two after.
Yeah.
Like it was a place you could be distant.
Right.
You know, as long as you book it right, like you can be pretty far out from each other.
You couldn't double up in a cart. Everybody had to have their own cart. But
not like the Heights is lately, man. Sometimes I've gone out there, it was like into last year, and it was like 3 people just on top, you know.
Yeah, I'm not into slow golf. It's like 4 or 5 hour golf rounds are not my jam. But
yeah, it's tough too, especially now, like me having kids and stuff like that. Yeah. It's like it's tough to justify being gone like a full half a day.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's so being, you know, retired, semi-retired, whatever. I have more time for it now. But yeah, I think golf is time consuming, and for somebody that's got a young family, I wouldn't encourage guys to put golf over their kids. So
yeah, dude, That is why that's very sound advice. It's okay to not be good at it right now. You can pick it
Totally.
up later on.
Yeah, and it is a great sport for not. I mean, it's a great sport for everybody that's into it, but it's a great sport when you get a little older because it's not as physically demanding and.
For sure.
Anyway, but the golf brands, it's fun to observe golf brands. I think one of my favorite ones right now to kind of pay attention to is Malbon.
Oh, yeah. Their stuff is so cool. And they also, I know we both know this course, Cabot here in Florida, they just had a Malbon tournament. Did you see that?
Did they? I didn't know that.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it now. It probably isn't as high of a ticket. I'm going to say this, and this is not like money that I can just throw around by any means, but like thinking about all that it came with, it probably wasn't that bad. It was, I think, a 2 or 3 day trip. You get housing for 2 nights. You get all of their courses and meals taken care of. It was like $2,000 or something like that.
That doesn't sound that bad. If you get housing and food.
And when you think about the course, Cabot, they're going to play Valspar there. It's a championship level course.
Totally.
So, but I just know the gear and the merch that was there is probably the coolest stuff.
So that just recently happened?
I think it may be in March actually.
Oh,
it may still be out there.
There's still time.
There's
Maybe
still
we should
time.
sign up.
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast and we want to start a GoFundMe for us to play there, please do.
Perfect.
It's so cool. Malbon's so cool. There's another one, Bogey Boys, the one that was the Macklemore started and all that. There's still some pretty cool stuff that they're doing.
Have you seen Good?
I don't think I have.
Yeah.
No.
They started with just YouTube videos and
Really?
they blew up.
Yeah.
And so now, of course, they have merch.
Of course.
But the Malbon one is just, to me, it's just very, if you get a chance, you can look up and kind of see an interview or a podcast of his backstory and how he got started is pretty interesting. And it's really, I mean, it's a golf brand, but it's also a lifestyle brand.
For sure. Yeah. Like I have a few pieces from Malbon. It's cool to see too, like, I feel like the collaboration he's done where like maybe going back 5-10 years or so, like golf had a very specific style, basic polo, khakis, and some sort of hat, where they've brought in like rap artists. They've brought in different types of themes, and like they have a one with Willie Nelson right now, which is kind of cool. Yeah. But just to like combine that golf style with something that's a little bit more modern and more cool,
that's really what his brand sort of was born from. So he started playing golf, got really, into it. And then as his son started, growing up, being old enough to play golf, he would get his son to go play, but his son didn't think golf was cool because of what you just said, the sort of like very narrow style of golf, polos. And I think he was playing at country clubs. So,
very specific dress code.
Pretty tight. And he was like, dang, like, what can I do to like make golf cool? Like, I want my kid and his friends to think that golf is cool. And that was the inspiration for his brand, to kind of take street style and kind of merge it with golf. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, dude, I remember when my dad was trying to get me into golf. It was not like, I don't think he had that in mind. He's awesome. But like, I remember like having to put on the collared shirts and the like pleated khakis, and I was a big kid. I was a big kid, so a tucked in shirt with pleated khakis did not look good, dude. But you talked about like getting into branding and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of a world you've lived in for quite a while, right? Like branding and marketing and all that kind of stuff. Probably like most recently now with Catapult and what you oversee there. We'll get into that, but what you've also done with Publix in the past, right?
Right.
How long were you there at Publix?
I worked at Publix for 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, retired there about actually 4 years ago, March.
Jeez, wow. So it's been a little while now, 4 years.
Yeah.
Man.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Does it feel like that long? Has it flown by?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, it's like in some ways it feels like, man, it was just, a month ago that I was working there. And in other ways it feels like it was eons ago. So
I get that. Yeah.
I guess it just depends on what day it is.
Well, I'd love to talk through like because I know you've shared it with me a while ago. We talked about it's probably been years since we've talked through this, but just the story of how you got started at Publix and because you didn't start being the branding guy
no, not at all.
and the all that kind of stuff in marketing. And I think that's kind of Publix's. And maybe I'm sure there's different like for different reasons, whatever. But for the most part, it's sort of a company that they really grow somebody within, right? That's kind of the overall goal there, right?
Historically, yes, I would say that certainly still exists today, but you have to kind of put all this in context. So when I started there, over 40 years ago, much smaller company. When I started, I'm sure we had less than 300 stores. We were only in the state of Georgia. And so that whole promotion from within thing was a big deal. And it was the primary, means of growth for leadership for years. But as the company continued to grow and expand, the need to hire outside experience became more critical. But I would say, to your point, yes, growth from within, development of internal talent is still, a core of the
well, and
philosophy.
I think that's great. I remember graduating college and trying to get certain jobs at Publix. And I'm not saying, I think this is a good thing. Like it was really hard to get a job at Publix if I hadn't had prior experience at Publix. And I did. I was actually a bag boy at Publix, when I was in high school back in Georgia for like a summer. And so that was my one experience.
Somebody that lives in the Publix footprint, it is so common to hear that, oh yeah, I worked at Publix, front end service, bag boy, whatever, cashier when I was in high school or college. It's very common.
Well, you said when you started there was like less than 300.
Yeah.
Do you know what is it at now? Like
is
it over 1,000?
Oh yeah, it's somewhere around 1,300, maybe closer to 14. I think it's around 1,300.
It's wild. And I know like you've seen them develop way more than I have. I remember being a kid going to Publix, and then now there's like Publixes with like upstairs, like in the one that's closest to my parents' house in Georgia. It's like they have like an upstairs with like a eating area and all kinds of nice stuff, dude. The Green Wises ones too, like some of those that have been around. I think are they still around too?
No, actually, Publix shut down the Green Wise stores.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So all those stores have been converted back to Publix, but they still have the Green Wise brand. For products in the Publix stores.
But there's a lot of them now. So when you started, what was the role that you stepped into working at Publix, and how did you get that job?
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, met my wife Becky in college in Michigan, and we got married. Was trying to figure out where we should live. Becky had spent time. Becky actually went to high school middle school, junior high, and high school in Lakeland.
Oh, okay.
Even though she was originally from Michigan. So she had moved down here when she was younger. So she came back to Michigan to go to college. We both went to Spring Arbor University. That's where I met her. And so we're deciding, after we get married, where we're going to live. And we decided to move to Lakeland because that's where she had spent time here. So she had connections. Now, you have to understand my vision of Florida was what I experienced when I came down on spring break, which was Fort Lauderdale. So, for a Michigander who's spent very little time in Florida, you're thinking it's all beach and palm trees.
100%, yeah.
So we moved to Lakeland, and it was a bit of a culture shock for me. This is Lakeland in 1980. Nothing like Lakeland is today. And anyway, kind of fast forward. All right, got to get a job. And I had never heard of Publix before. I didn't know what Publix was, but it didn't take long being in Lakeland to figure out that Publix was one of the best employers, one of the hottest games in town. And that was the case, even in 1980. So I applied, took a couple months because they didn't have any openings. And So when I finally had the chance to get an interview, whoever was interviewing me asked me if I had any kind of work experience. And when I was in college, for a couple summers, I worked for a screen printer, and I learned, screen printing. So I told this guy I was interviewing with, I've had screen printing experience. And I thought he wouldn't even know what I was talking about. And he's like, well, you need to go down the road to the sign shop and see if they need anybody. So I like literally just drove down the road, go up to the sign shop, walk in and say, I need to see this guy, so-and-so.
Yeah.
And he interviewed me on the spot and said, we could use you, come back in a week. So that's how I got in at Publix.
That's great.
As a screen printer. I will just preface the rest of this with, this is clearly a case of God having a plan for me when I had no clue. Because prior to getting into that sign shop, I had no insight about advertising, about design, about anything like that. I had never thought of creative being a career opportunity. I was just looking for work.
Yeah.
But getting into that sign shop, which we don't really have a sign shop at Publix anymore, but that for me was exposure to all kinds of creative things. And so eventually I moved on from being a screen printer to being a layout artist. And so after, kind of doing that for, I guess, almost 9 years, my boss had gotten promoted into advertising. And he was the vice president of advertising, and he reached out to me and said, hey, I want to start an in-house like creative department. And if you're interested, I'd like for you to head that up. So that was around 1990. And we started that team with 5 people. We didn't really know what we were doing. Started doing a little bit of design work, a little bit of creative work. And then gradually over time, learned more, became more experienced, started to build the team with some more experienced people. And, over a longer period of time, the work started getting shifted into my team from the ad agencies that were doing work.
Yeah.
And eventually, and this was over a long period of time, but eventually our team became exclusively responsible for all of Publix branding. So that was, for all brand expression work. So that was everything from store environment, graphics packages, to package design for all the Publix private label items, to television commercials. Just anything to do with branding, we became responsible for. So, that team that we started with like 5 people, when I retired, we had, I think, about 115 people in creative services. So it was a great ride. I am so grateful, feel so blessed to have had the opportunity to work there all those years, and to be able to build that team and meet a lot of people. I just really feel like, God granted me a lot of favor. And
that's incredible.
It just, it was just a great experience. And I feel like the main reason that I was able to stay and work for one company for 40 years was because it's a great company whose values aligned so closely with many of my own personal values. So
I love something I want to get to that you mentioned first, and then kind of continue on with that is, you mentioned like just God having a plan for this whole thing before you even realized what Publix was, or that you were interested in like getting into creative design and into branding, into things like that. Like I've seen that in my own life, and I've talked about that a lot with people. Is I've had jobs in the past where I'm like, why am I doing this?
Right.
Like right out of college, like worked in things like financial aid, worked at coffee shops, worked in like teaching and all kinds of stuff like that, and had those moments. And I think those are actually, it's probably something you can speak to too, but I think that it's good to go through those moments. It's good to have those kind of jobs where you're like, okay, like rather than just I think the tendency lately for maybe some people is you get in environments like that and you just quit and you move on to the next
Right.
thing. Where it's like maybe there's something that God is teaching you in this moment. For me personally, working in financial aid at the college prepared me for the role that I did at our church
Right.
with working with college students and understanding the financial aid aspect, but also just the back end of, higher education. And teaching taught me something that at the time I needed. Was like, I needed to learn how to empathize more with people. That was something that I was wanting to develop with myself.
Yeah.
And teaching in a really rough area up in Pennsylvania taught me that.
Yeah.
And so I just think, I'm probably that was for you, right? First starting off in the print shop. Maybe there were some days where you're like,
oh,
what am I doing?
100%.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I think everything that you've said is right on. And I think that, in my case, a situation where, a career path that I'd never even dreamed of, and I didn't even know that I was gifted in some of those areas. So here's a situation where God is, using those experiences, me working part-time summer job as a screen printer. I had no clue that was something that was really preparing me for the next phase. And even getting in at Publix, it took me probably 5 years there before I realized, this could be a career for me. It was for those 5 years, I was just like,
having a job,
showing up,
getting a paycheck.
Getting a paycheck. But, I think one key thing that I learned from my parents was good work ethic. So to your point about people giving up, early, like, oh, this job's not for me. I don't know why I'm here. It's a dead end street. I think that's a great point because I think the reality is that, I talk to so many people that get so frustrated because they can't figure out what they're supposed to be doing. They feel like, and a lot of this has to do with our culture of like, oh, I have to, I have to be successful and I need to be successful I have to have a 5-year plan and it's supposed to look like this. And here's my 5-year goals and my 10-year goals. And I'm not against having goals, but I'm also not a fan of being so locked down or so locked in with some direction that you're not open to what God may want to be doing in your life.
Yeah.
And so for me, the bigger thing is preparing yourself for future opportunities. And the best way to do that is give 100% at whatever's on your plate today. Practice good work ethic, show up on time, be the kind of person that doesn't have to be asked, just take the initiative to do things. And you'd be surprised how many doors open. And I really believe that God's plan for us is to put us in a work environment that matches us up with the gifts that he's given us, right?
Yeah, right.
So
good. I think that like what you said there, like it took you 5 years to really figure out like, oh, this could be something that like I do, like I love to do for the rest of my time here at Publix, or just with my life. Like this is a passion of mine. I feel like even, and you've known me for a while, and so you've known we're working with the church, all that kind of stuff, and just being like around and knowing you, like it's a tough cycle I think to get on where you are putting success and achievement at the top as opposed to like, oh, what is God actually calling me to do? I mean, I feel like in a way those are two separate things. There's this like what you can easily get in this cycle of is, okay, how are people noticing me? How am I being successful? How am I getting to the top? Like, and so much of that probably in our world today is because of things like social media, which are good and bad, like you see everybody's wildest successes on there and you get to see all the cool cars and all the success they have. And you don't see the time put in, for most cases, you don't see the time put in to get there. Right. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but just like 5 years is not that long.
No.
And I think for us, sometimes we can get in that mode where we feel like 5 years is forever.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we're in a role for 2 to 3 years and we're like, stuck in this forever.
I'm not going
it's like,
anywhere. I can't see what's going to happen for me.
Where like just in 5 years, you were able to catch that, oh man, this is something. And then 10 years, you're a part of a innovative team that changed a lot for Publix over the years.
Yeah, great comments, plenty to respond to there. I think back to your thing about social media, and we hear this all the time, but it's still worth repeating. It's the comparison culture that we have today is just can be so damaging for people. And if we stop and think about it, and again, we hear a lot about this, but what people are posting, that's not their real lives so often, So I'm opposed to the whole comparison culture that's been created. And when you talk about success, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. It's like, well, what is your definition of success? What is anyone's definition of success? What the world would tell us is success is a 6-figure job, a 3,000 square foot house with 2 nice new cars in the garage, and so on and so on. Well, if that's your definition of success, then you're probably going to be unhappy for a while, or you're going to achieve what you've defined success to be, and you're still going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
So it's like it really has to go back to, and what I try to coach or mentor people on is like, what is success? And if you're a believer, we have a different set of guidelines for what success is. And what I have found is that when we learn to follow those guidelines, which is, putting Jesus first, putting our family, second, and serving other people, when you sort of put things in that order and you work hard. I'm not saying that we should be a slacker and not try to achieve, but when you have your priorities in order, and those are the things that we put at the top for success, then the monetary part, it just comes.
Yeah.
It happens.
Success finds you.
Right.
I feel like in that. This is not like a Christian role model by any means, but like there was an interview that I saw with like Bob Marley. I don't know if you've seen this one before, but he was being asked, he was like, some interviewer was asking Bob Marley, he was like, do you feel like you're successful? And Bob Marley stopped for a second. He was like, what's success to you?
Right.
And he was like, well, have you made a lot of money? He's like, oh, okay, so success is money to you? And the guy was like, yeah, well, he's like, okay, well, what's a lot of money? And he was like, well, have you made millions? And he's like, no. He's like, but that's not, but he goes on to talk like, that's not success for me. Yeah. I'm not looking for millions. But it was just funny because like this guy was like, oh, are you successful? Have you made the millions? Right. It's like, no, like he's probably in his instance, it's like, I'm doing something I love. And I think for us bringing it back to like a Christian context too is, man, when I've put God at the top of my life, when I've put my family under that, and then when I've put the things that need to be friends and my job and what God's entrusted me with work, all that after that, like the success and stuff will find you. Right. That's if people could get that, I feel like the exhausting part is getting that out of order or flipping that upside down where you're like, my work is the top. I got to chase this. And then it's my wife and kids.
Right. You're just, I don't think I've met very few people that have those priorities that are happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or at least happy for long.
Right. It's short term.
It doesn't
because
last.
They're chasing. Mm-hmm. So the problem with chasing, when we're talking about not chasing Jesus, but chasing the monetary, the world's definition for success, you're oftentimes the mindset of that individual is like, oh, if I can just get here, then I'll be happy. Well, the reality is 3 years from now, they're here and they're still not happy. They're chasing the next thing. It's like this perpetual chase. Yeah. And that's because we just know that's not where the true happiness comes from.
For sure. Yeah. That's so good. And again, I come back to it. It's like, I don't think that social media is necessarily an evil. I have a weird place with it because I feel it's helpful, especially like with the show and everything and posting about it and all that. But in an ideal world, I would just wish it was gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if I didn't have to,
Yeah.
that's a weird place to be too, where it's like, maybe I don't have to, but
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like you said before, there's good in it and there's evil in it. There's bad in it, and it's just putting it in its proper place. I mean, how would we know what Malbon was doing if we didn't have social media? Right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's the fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's all the other stuff that just like brings me down during the day.
Yeah, the comparison part and plenty of other haters and stuff like that. That's just that's the negative side of it. But
well, coming back to your work there at Publix and all, so 10 years is for you. Around 10 years is when that kind of new team
that's
launches.
when stuff started to really click.
Yeah. And for you, you were, I mean, I'm assuming, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, you were chosen for that team just because you were consistent and at your role and just had stuck with it and started to develop a passion there, right?
Yes. It wasn't because my boss that gave me the promotion saw that like I had all this great creative experience. It wasn't that at all. It was more so just practicing good work discipline.
Yeah.
You know, meaning like I was dependable, showed up on time, you know, worked hard. I treated others well. I mean, I'm sure I must have demonstrated some sort of creative skill for him to think that I could do that. But I think bottom line is I demonstrated some leadership potential.
Yeah. That's awesome. And when you were a part of that team, I know that's 30 years of your career there in that one team.
Yeah.
Is there one like project or something you did there that stands out to you? Like, oh man, this was something really cool, really special I got to work on?
Yeah. Yes. So I will answer that question and then I'll follow it up with what I think was even more important when I look back on my career. So the probably the project that stands out the most, that was the most significant, was, man, I don't even know how long ago it was. It was probably like 20 years ago, maybe more, maybe 25 years ago. Our team was tasked with redesigning the whole Publix private label branding system. So the Publix brand, you know, line of products.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had thousands of SKUs, and I could get really in deep detail about all that, but I'll just get to the point. We had the opportunity to redesign all of that, and it was a huge project, and we didn't really have a lot of fans, I guess you will. Like a lot of corporate people didn't really want us to change it. And so it was a battle. It was kind of a struggle to get it redesigned and get it approved, but we did.
Yeah.
And once it started getting in the stores, it really started to gain traction, and it went from, you know, maybe some internal naysayers to people that were like, all of a sudden, because they saw the sales impact, they were wanting us to get it rolled out as quickly as we could. And so it had a significant sales impact for the company. So that was good. It helped to build a lot of credibility for my team.
Yeah.
And this isn't why we do work, but we got a lot of national recognition. Like I was interviewed by the New York Times, Sunday Magazine.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
They
That's
featured it. You know, that design work won a lot of awards. It got a lot of recognition for our team. So that was, you know, very significant in the life of creative services. And that design system, I mean, it's still in the stores today. It's like when you walk around, you see a Publix product that's primarily white. It's got a color band on the top and a black, you know, Publix logo at the top. That's still the system that's out there, but finally it's being redesigned. So depending on what department you're in, you're going to kind of start to see the new, I mean, I still keep up with what's
going on there.
Doing.
Yeah.
And so the new design system is awesome. It's fresh.
That's cool.
I love it. But that was, to answer your question, that was kind of maybe one of the more significant projects. But what I like to share is that when you're thinking about work, regardless of where your career is, to me, the most important thing that you can do and the most valuable thing is, and this may sound cliche, but it's the people. So, the projects come and go. I mean, that private label project seems to be memorable, but there were so many campaigns that we did that, yeah, they were good, they were effective, but they come and go. People don't remember them. What really you hold on to is the relationships you build, the opportunity that you had maybe to have impact on someone's life or somebody having impact on my life. Those things are lifetime memories and their lifetime impact. And so what I look back on is 40 years of great relationships, many of which I still have today. That's the most meaningful part. And so I think a good job, a good career includes doing great work for whatever company you're working for, making a difference in the work, but more importantly, making a difference in the lives of the people that you work with and making a difference in the lives of the customers that you're serving. That is kingdom focused,
Yeah, that's so true. And sometimes I feel like even that is easier than you think. Like when you're at work, like there's things that I've had, and I've definitely not the same experience as you, and you've been at Publix for so long. But in some of the roles that I've had in the past, I've had people reach out to me and be like, "Oh, that thing you said that, to be honest with you, I kind of forgot that I said was like so impactful, and it really helped me." It's like, oh man, cool. It wasn't like, it doesn't take a ton of effort, I guess, to say is like to just be kind and to be encouraging and to be a great presence at your workplace.
Yes. I totally agree. It doesn't take that much effort to be nice, to be kind. And the most valuable thing I learned in terms of communication practices is being a great listener. I mean, I think being a great listener, which is not so easy to do because we're always thinking about what we want to say, how we're going to react, how we're going to respond. But if we can be disciplined and become great listeners, that to me is another very valuable communication skill.
Very true. Yeah, that's something I do like in my current role right now is like with the consulting that I do for like churches, stuff like that is like so much of like I'm more successful at my job when I do a lot less of the talking. And when I'm helping consult people, it's like, what's valuable to you right now?
Right.
And you can do that whether it's like this kind of role or if you're overseeing a team or if you even just like you work at like a 9 to 5 or you work at a restaurant or whatever. It's like it doesn't take much to just be encouraging or say something helpful to somebody,
Exactly.
But go ahead.
Well, I just like your comment about somebody saying, "Hey, you remember that time you told me something? It was so helpful," and you don't even remember it. It's like that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a great reminder that you never know when you might say something that is extremely helpful to somebody, and it might have been lost on you. You didn't really even think anything about it, but it was, I believe that it's the Holy Spirit when we're being sensitive and truly living out, our prayer for the day, Lord, please use me. Let your Holy Spirit direct me in what I say. I think that when we practice that, we're oftentimes probably saying something to somebody that we didn't even know that it was helping them in that moment,
Yeah. The power of how easy it is to like just taking a little time for people. Honestly, it kind of comes into like the passion for me in doing like this, like the podcast, the show that we have here is partly I enjoy this. Like I enjoy sitting with people like yourself or just whoever and getting to talk, getting to learn a little bit more. But also like, I've chatted this with friends before is I thought that the goal from this was like, there's a great, for instance, and I use this one often, is like there's a guy that was on our show recently. His name's John David, plays bass, like reggae guy, super awesome. I'd seen him at Concord all the time. And I feel like my usual thing is like going coffee, just being on my phone, order my coffee, get out of there. And this kind of like having a show or whatever causes you to kind of stop and be like, I need to get to know some of the people around me,
That's cool.
And I mean, I think that's good whether you have a podcast or not. You should, still
Absolutely.
like maybe put your phone down a little bit and get to know people around you. But it's remarkable too, that the impact that you can have on somebody, but also that they can have on you when you're just open and available like that,
Exactly. That's so good, Alec.
Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate. I want to do just real quick, kind of maybe catching people up to date with what you're doing right now, right?
Sure.
Because you're with Catapult, kind of helping oversee. What is that like?
Yeah, it's awesome. I work there. I don't really even like to call it work. I hang out there a few days a week.
You have an office.
I do have an office. And so for people that don't really know exactly what Catapult is, a brief description is it's an incubator to help startups get launched. And so I'm one of the resident experts, and so I get to help members with their branding strategies. And it's just a lot of fun. I get to hang out and talk with these startups, and a lot of times the conversations are around their branding strategies, what their needs are, et cetera. But it's also an opportunity to talk about life with a lot of them. So
For sure. Well, yeah, you get to be a part of a lot of cool stuff that's coming out of Lakeland, out of Central Florida here. Like Mike and Mike's, right?
Yeah.
They're out of the Catapult. They were on the show earlier this year, very beginning.
Great guys.
Awesome guys. Yeah. And what they're building is like legit. Like it's so good. If you've had them before, I'm guessing the cupcakes, they're so good.
Good stuff.
And they're really cool too. So it's cool to see like stuff that's coming out of an area like that, and they get to learn from y'all. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out of Catapult, right?
Yep. A lot of great stuff happening there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much. Like kind of what we do is at the end of the show is just with one more minute left is maybe if there's anything that you would want to leave with somebody that's listening, just like a word of encouragement or maybe something from today that would just be great as we head out.
Yeah, I think that it would be to kind of speak briefly again about something we were already talking about. And that is, I have a special spot in my heart for people that are feeling that pressure of like, oh, I have to have life figured out. I'm like 25, I'm 30 and I still don't know, or maybe I'm 40 and I still don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And my message is it's okay.
Yeah.
Like it is okay. What you need to do is make the most of what you have on your plate today. You need to be preparing for opportunities that might be unseen. And the way you do that is just, you get after it today. You meet people, you build relationships, and if you're a person of faith, you trust God that he's going to open the doors accordingly. So I just hate to see people get so, anxious about not knowing what they're supposed to be doing. It's going to be okay. It's going to work out.
Yeah, so good. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey,
man.
thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, man.
Yeah.